In a quiet, remote village, surrounded by lush mountains and flowing rivers, life moved at a slow and steady pace. But behind closed doors, not every household shared the tranquility of the landscape. Sayira, a young woman blessed with grace and beauty, had lived a life of comfort and privilege in her father's home. Her father, a respected merchant in the region, had ensured she was well educated and cared for, treating her as his most precious treasure. However, everything changed after his untimely death. Sayira's stepmother, Dilrada, took control of the household, and with her father gone, Sayira found herself trapped under the harsh and manipulative rule of a woman who resented her very existence. Dilrada, jealous of Sayira's beauty and the affection her late husband had showered on her, saw her as nothing more than an obstacle and a burden. While outwardly maintaining appearances, Dilrada's schemes to make Sayira's life miserable grew bolder with time. Rumors began to spread in the village that Dilrada had plans to marry Sayira off. Many assumed it would be to a man of status and wealth, given Sayira's upbringing and beauty. However, Dilrada had a different plan in mind. She secretly arranged for Sayira to be married to Tahiryan, a humble farmer who lived in a modest hut on the outskirts of the village. Tahiryan was well known among the villagers, not for wealth or influence, but for his honesty and kind-hearted nature. He worked tirelessly in his fields, always ready to lend a helping hand to those in need. His life was simple and his possessions few, yet he carried himself with quiet dignity. When Sayira overheard the decision, she was devastated. The idea of leaving her family home and being married off to a poor farmer felt like a betrayal of everything her father had wanted for her. She pleaded with Dilrada, hoping to appeal to some hidden sense of kindness, but her stepmother coldly dismissed her tears, declaring that the marriage was final and there was no room for negotiation. On the other side of the village, Tahiryan received the news of the arranged marriage with mixed emotions. He had never imagined marrying someone like Sayira, a woman whose world seemed so far removed from his. While he admired her beauty and grace from afar, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility about to fall upon him. Still, he resolved to accept the arrangement with gratitude, determined to treat Sayira with the respect and care she deserved. As the preparations for the wedding began, Sayira found herself slipping further into despair. The villagers whispered about the unusual match, some pitying her situation, while others gossiped about the humiliation she was about to face. Dilrada, satisfied with her success in orchestrating this union, reveled in the thought of Sayira struggling in poverty and obscurity. The stage was set for a marriage that appeared doomed to failure, but the seeds of change had already been planted, waiting for their moment to bloom. The news of Sayira's impending marriage spread quickly through the village, but no one dared question Dilrada's decision. The villagers understood her reputation for being cold and calculating, and many pitied Sayira for the fate she could not escape. Sayira, on the other hand, was consumed by a sense of helplessness. Her protests fell on deaf ears, and her cries were dismissed as nothing more than childish defiance. She turned to her younger brother, Kaldin, for support. Kaldin, though not much older than a boy, had always been protective of his sister. He confronted Dilrada, his voice trembling with anger as he accused her of treating Sayira unfairly. But Dilrada, ever manipulative, swiftly silenced him. She reminded him of their precarious financial situation and threatened to make his life miserable if he interfered. She painted a picture of Tahiryan as a hard-working, honest man, claiming this was the best match Sayira could ever hope for. Kaldin knew there was little he could do. His hands were tied. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur for Sayira. She watched as preparations were made without her involvement or approval. Her stepmother, ensuring the wedding remained as simple and inexpensive as possible, chose plain garments for Sayira and dismissed the idea of any celebration. There was no joy, no excitement, only a heavy sense of finality that loomed over Sayira's heart. On the day of the wedding, Sayira sat silently as the village elder conducted the ceremony. A handful of villagers gathered, some out of curiosity and others out of sympathy. Sayira's eyes stayed downcast, her hands trembling as she exchanged vows she didn't mean. She could feel the weight of judgment in the villagers' gazes, the whispers behind her back, and the pity in their eyes. Tahiryan, though equally nervous, tried his best to remain calm. He was keenly aware of Sayira's unhappiness and the humiliation she must have felt. But he carried himself with quiet dignity, promising himself that he would do everything in his power to make this union work. He was determined to treat Sayira with the kindness and respect he believed she deserved, even if her heart was far from his. As the ceremony ended and Sayira was taken to Tahiryan's modest home, a new wave of despair washed over her. The tiny house was nothing like the grand estate she had grown up in. The walls were made of clay, the roof thatched with dried grass, and the few pieces of furniture were worn but well kept. Everything about it spoke of poverty, and Sayira couldn't help but feel like a caged bird whose wings had been clipped. Tahiryan, sensing her discomfort, tried to ease the tension. He showed her the small garden he had cultivated behind the house, pointing out the vegetables and flowers he had grown with care. But Sayira barely glanced at them, her mind clouded with thoughts of everything she had lost. She felt betrayed, not just by Dilrada, but by life itself. That night, as she lay on the simple cot in the corner of the house, Sayira fought back tears. She thought of her father, wishing he were still alive to protect her from this fate. She thought of Kaldin, who had tried to help her, but was powerless against Dilrada's tyranny. Most of all, she thought of the life she had envisioned for herself, now replaced by a reality she couldn't escape. Tahiryan, meanwhile, stayed up late, sitting outside under the stars. He couldn't stop thinking about Sayira's sadness and how out of place she seemed in his world. He wondered if he would ever be able to bridge the gap between them, to make her see that their marriage didn't have to be a prison. Deep down, he hoped she would one day come to accept him, if not love him. As the first night of their marriage passed in silence, the gulf between them seemed insurmountable. Sayira felt trapped in a life she didn't choose, while Tahiryan struggled to find a way to connect with the woman who now shared his home. The road ahead seemed uncertain and fraught with challenges, but somewhere in the quiet night, the seeds of a story yet to unfold were quietly being sown. Sayira's new life felt like an endless test of endurance. Each morning she woke up to the crowing of roosters and the smell of the damp earth around the tiny house, a far cry from the fragrant perfumes and soft silk sheets of her father's estate. She missed the luxuries that had once been so easily within her reach: a warm bath, elaborate meals, and servants to cater to her every need. Here, everything was simple, bare, and often backbreaking. The modest home, though tidy, offered little comfort. Sayira found the clay walls suffocating and the sparse furnishings unwelcoming. Her daily tasks, which now included carrying water from the well, cooking over a smoky fire, and tending to the small vegetable garden, were exhausting and unfamiliar. Frustration often bubbled to the surface, especially when she caught herself comparing her current life to the one she had been forced to leave behind. Her resentment toward Tahiryan grew as she associated him with the loss of everything she once held dear. Though he had done nothing to hurt her, she viewed him as a symbol of her stepmother's cruelty and her own powerlessness. She would often sit silently in the corner, barely acknowledging him, her thoughts consumed by bitterness and longing for the life she'd lost. Tahiryan, however, never once raised his voice or showed frustration at her coldness. He understood the enormity of the change Sayira was facing and resolved to meet her resentment with patience and kindness. Every morning, he rose early to tend to his fields, working tirelessly under the sun to ensure they had enough to eat. Despite his own exhaustion, he always made time to ensure Sayira was as comfortable as possible within their limited means. One evening, as Sayira sat on the edge of the small cot, she felt a sudden snap beneath her foot. Looking down, she realized her shoe had torn, leaving her with no proper footwear for the next day. She sighed in frustration, setting it aside and resigning herself to the discomfort. However, Later that night, she was startled to see a faint light coming from the doorway. Peeking out, she saw Tahiryan sitting by a small oil lamp, carefully mending her shoe with the precision of someone deeply invested in the task. He worked late into the night, threading the needle and patching the worn material with pieces of cloth he had saved for emergencies. When she woke the next morning, she found the repaired shoe placed neatly by the cot. Though she didn't say anything to him, her heart softened slightly at the sight. Another moment came when Tahiryan surprised her with a gift. One afternoon, he returned from his work in the fields with something tucked in his hands. As Sayira sat on the doorstep, he approached her shyly, holding out a small necklace he had crafted from local wildflowers and thin vines. The delicate piece, though simple, was carefully made, each flower chosen for its vibrant color and scent. "For you," he said quietly, his voice gentle but hesitant, as though unsure how she would react. Sayira stared at the necklace, unsure of what to say. It was not the kind of jewelry she had worn in her previous life. There were no precious stones or gleaming metals, but there was a quiet beauty in its simplicity. More than that, she could see the effort Tahiryan had put into creating it, and for the first time, she felt a pang of guilt for how distant she had been toward him. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She placed the necklace around her neck, feeling the soft petals brush against her skin. Tahiryan's face lit up with a quiet smile, and though the moment was brief, it left a lasting impression on both of them. As the days turned into weeks, Sayira began to notice other small acts of kindness. Tahiryan would return home with firewood already chopped, so she wouldn't have to struggle with it. He would offer to take over her tasks when she was too tired, always doing so without complaint or expectation. Though his gestures were small, they were consistent, and they began to chip away at the wall Sayira had built around her heart. Gradually, Sayira's resentment started to give way to reluctant appreciation. She began to see Tahiryan not as the cause of her suffering, but as a man who was doing his best to make her life easier in whatever ways he could. While she still missed the luxuries of her father's home, she found herself focusing less on what she had lost and more on the quiet strength and care Tahiryan showed her every day. For the first time since her marriage, she allowed herself to wonder if life in this tiny home could hold something more than hardship. Though her journey was far from over, the seeds of hope and understanding had begun to take root, nurtured by the unwavering kindness of the man she had once resented. One evening, as Sayira sat near the fire, her eyes caught sight of a small wooden figure sitting on the shelf by the wall. It was a delicate carving of a bird in mid-flight, its wings outstretched with an elegance that seemed almost lifelike. She hadn't noticed it before, buried beneath other mundane items, but now it caught her attention. Intrigued, she walked over to inspect it more closely. Tahiryan, who had been quietly working outside in the garden, came into the room and saw her studying the sculpture. He froze for a moment, as if uncertain whether he should speak or not. "Did you make this?" Sayira asked, her voice soft but curious. Tahiryan nodded, his expression sheepish. "I carve things sometimes, when I have the time," he replied, as though embarrassed by the question. Sayira examined the bird more closely, tracing the smooth lines and delicate details with her fingers. It was clear that the carving wasn't just a hobby or pastime. It was a true work of art. There were subtle details, like the way the feathers were etched to catch the light, or how the wings seemed poised to take flight. The craftsmanship was something far beyond the simple, utilitarian objects she had expected from a man of his humble background. "Why have you never shown anyone these?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Tahiryan hesitated, avoiding her gaze. "I never thought they were worth much, and I didn't want to draw attention to myself," he admitted. "People in the village know me as a farmer, not as an artist. I don't want to seem like I'm boasting or asking for pity." Sayira felt a stirring in her chest. She had seen so many fine works of art in her previous life, exquisite paintings, intricate jewelry, and elegant sculptures. But something about Tahiryan's humble creations touched her, in a way those expensive, polished items never had. His work was raw, sincere, and filled with emotion. "Tahiryan," Sayira said, her tone serious, "these are too beautiful to keep hidden. You should show the world. You could make money from this, real money. We could take them to the village market." Tahiryan's eyes widened with surprise, and a tinge of apprehension crept into his expression. "No, Sayira, I can't do that. People will think it's foolish. I don't need to sell anything. I have enough to get by." But Sayira, determined now, placed a hand gently on his arm. "You're too humble. People would pay for this kind of work. Your carvings are worth more than you think." Her words lingered in the air, and Tahiryan seemed to wrestle with the idea for a long moment. Finally, he sighed, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "You really think so?" "I know so," she replied confidently, her eyes meeting his. That was all it took. Tahiryan agreed to let her help him prepare his sculptures for sale. The following days became a whirlwind of activity as the two of them worked together. Sayira found herself in uncharted territory, shaping the sales pitch, arranging the carvings neatly on a cloth, and helping Tahiryan clean up each piece to make it presentable. She had never imagined herself playing such a role in something so practical, but the more she immersed herself in the task, the more excited she became. She saw the pride in Tahiryan's eyes as he showed her each piece, explaining the inspiration behind it, how he'd carved a lion to represent strength or a flower to symbolize new beginnings. Sayira was amazed by how much thought and care went into each sculpture. They worked well together, her practical approach to selling complementing his artistic vision. The morning they set out for the village market was filled with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Tahiryan carried the pieces with caution, his arms cradling them gently as if they were precious treasures, while Sayira took the lead, her heart beating faster as they approached the bustling market square. As they set up their small display, Sayira couldn't help but notice how the villagers eyed the sculptures with curiosity. She was confident that their beauty would speak for itself. And when a few curious buyers started to approach, inspecting the carvings with admiration, Sayira felt a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't anticipated. By the end of the day, they had sold a handful of sculptures, earning more money than they had imagined. Tahiryan, who had been skeptical of his own abilities, couldn't hide his surprise and joy. His creations, once dismissed as simple hobbies, had found a place in the hearts of others. As they walked back home that evening, with a small pouch of money in Sayira's hand and a sense of pride swelling in her chest, she realized just how much this moment meant. For Tahiryan, it was the first time he had allowed himself to believe in the value of his art. For Sayira, it was a reminder of the power of kindness and belief in one another, how a simple act of encouragement could lead to something truly transformative. As the days passed, Tahiryan's sculptures became the talk of the village market. What had begun as a small display of humble carvings gradually attracted the attention of not only the local villagers, but also several wealthy buyers from neighboring towns. The fine details and unique nature of each piece caught the eyes of those with an appreciation for artistry, and soon, word of Tahiryan's talent spread beyond the village. At first, Sayira couldn't believe the change that had come so quickly. What seemed like a simple endeavor to help her husband had blossomed into something far more significant. Each sale brought in more than they had ever expected, and with each transaction, Tahiryan's confidence grew. He began to carve more intricate pieces, pushing his limits as an artist, while Sayira took on the role of negotiating prices and organizing their sales. One afternoon, a wealthy merchant from a nearby city stopped by their stall. His attire and mannerisms indicated that he had wealth and taste, and as he examined Tahiryan's sculptures, his eyes lit up with admiration. "These pieces," he said, running a hand over the intricate carvings, "are exquisite. I've never seen anything like them. I'm willing to offer you a very generous price for the entire collection." Sayira, her heart racing, stood next to Tahiryan as they weighed the offer. She had never imagined that something as simple as wood carvings would lead to such an opportunity. After a moment of consideration, they accepted the merchant's offer. The deal was struck, and in return, they received more money than they had earned in months. As the weeks passed, their small savings began to grow. With the extra income, Sayira felt a newfound sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. Tahiryan, with his quiet and steady nature, had proven that wealth wasn't always measured by gold or land. It was also about skill, patience, and perseverance. Sayira had underestimated him when they first married, but now she saw him in a completely different light. His talent, his kindness, and his determination had created a life for them that was richer than she could have ever imagined. With the money they earned, Tahiryan began working on improving their home. Slowly but surely, the small hut they had started in began to transform. Tahiryan worked tirelessly during the day, adding new walls, a better roof, and more space for them to live comfortably. Sayira, who had once been so embarrassed by the thought of living in such poverty, found herself growing fond of the home they were building together. It was becoming a symbol of their hard work and success. Every evening, as they sat together by the fire, Sayira would watch Tahiryan, his hands calloused from the work, but his eyes bright with hope. She had seen how far they had come from that first day of their marriage, how they had worked through adversity and found their place in the world. Tahiryan's quiet strength and love had reshaped her life in ways she never expected, and with each passing day, she felt a deeper connection to him. The market success was only the beginning. What had started as a small partnership in a village had turned into something much bigger, something built on mutual respect, love, and a shared vision of a better future. And Sayira knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a beautiful journey they would continue to walk together. Dilrada, in the comfort of her luxurious home, had been hearing whispers about the changes in Sayira's life. News of Tahiryan's newfound success reached her ears one afternoon, and a bitter feeling of jealousy began to grow in her heart. She had never anticipated that her plan to humiliate Sayira would turn into the complete opposite. Sayira, who she had believed would suffer from the poor marriage, was now thriving, and Dilrada couldn't stand the thought of her stepdaughter finding happiness in a life she had no control over. Unable to accept the fact that Sayira was no longer under her thumb, Dilrada decided that something had to be done. She could not let her stepdaughter live a life of comfort and prosperity when she had hoped for her downfall. She began to scheme, planning to ruin Sayira's life once again and take away everything she had worked for. The first step in her malicious plan was to attack Tahiryan's character. Dilrada was not one to shy away from gossip, and she used her influence to spread rumors about Tahiryan throughout the village. She claimed that he had not truly earned his wealth through hard work, but had stolen it from the villagers. How could someone so poor become so rich so quickly? She would whisper to anyone who would listen. Tahiryan is a fraud. He has been taking from others to line his own pockets. Don't trust him. He's a thief. At first, the villagers were hesitant to believe the rumors. After all, they had seen how kind and humble Tahiryan had always been. But as Dilrada continued to spread her lies, doubt began to seep into the community. People began to wonder how a simple farmer could suddenly afford such luxuries, especially with his new, improved home. The whispers became louder, and with each passing day, the once warm reception to Tahiryan's work turned into skepticism. Sayira watched in disbelief as the once friendly faces at the market began to avoid her and Tahiryan. The crowd that had once gathered to admire his carvings now passed by with distrust in their eyes. Some buyers even began to question the authenticity of his work, fearing it might be tainted by dishonesty. Business at the market slowed drastically, and the once thriving sales plummeted. Despite the growing tension, Tahiryan remained calm and composed. He never believed the rumors and was determined to keep working, even if it meant facing opposition. But Sayira could see the hurt in his eyes, a reflection of how deeply the whispers had wounded him. He had worked so hard to build a life with her, and now everything was threatened by the malicious lies of a woman who would stop at nothing to destroy their happiness. One evening, as they sat in their modest home, Sayira couldn't bear to see Tahiryan's silent pain any longer. She knew that her stepmother's cruelty was behind this, and she vowed to confront the lies and put an end to the rumors once and for all. "I won't let her win," Sayira said, her voice firm. "We have built something real, Tahiryan. Our love, our work, none of it is a lie. I won't let her tear us apart." Tahiryan smiled softly, though there was still a shadow of doubt in his eyes. "The truth will come out eventually, Sayira. We just have to keep going, no matter what." But Sayira could sense the weight of his words. He was right, but she knew that it would take more than just patience to restore their good name. Dilrada's poison had already begun to spread, and the only way to stop it was to expose the truth in a way that no one could ignore. As the days passed, Sayira began to think of a plan to clear Tahiryan's name and reclaim their happiness. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the sake of their future and the love they had built, she was ready to fight back against the lies. Little did she know that this battle would test her in ways she never imagined, but her determination to protect Tahiryan would be the key to their redemption. The once timid Sayira, who had accepted her fate without protest, now felt a surge of determination she had never experienced before. Over the past few days, she had watched her world slowly unravel because of Dilrada's lies. The woman who had controlled every aspect of Sayira's life had now crossed a line, one that Sayira would no longer tolerate. The cruelty, the manipulation, the false accusations against her husband. It was enough. Sayira had been silent for far too long, but no more. As she stood beside Tahiryan in their small, newly built home that evening, she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had to confront Dilrada. She had to put an end to the lies once and for all. Tahiryan, who had always been so patient, looked at her with concern in his eyes. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. Confronting her like this, it could cause more trouble. But Sayira, now stronger than ever, shook her head. "I can't let her destroy us, Tahiryan. I won't stand by and watch her ruin everything we've worked for." The next morning, Sayira set out with a fire in her heart. She had heard that Dilrada would be at the village square, speaking to some of the villagers. This was the moment Sayira had been waiting for. She was determined to stand up for the truth, to fight for her husband, and to take control of her own destiny. As she approached the square, she could see Dilrada standing with a group of villagers, whispering among themselves. They glanced over at Sayira as she walked toward them, the tension in the air palpable. Sayira's heart raced, but she didn't let the fear consume her. She had come this far, and she wasn't turning back. Dilrada saw her coming and gave a smug smile, clearly expecting to see Sayira cower before her. "Well, well, the poor little wife is finally here. What do you want, Sayira? You come to defend your thief of a husband?" Sayira took a deep breath, her voice steady and unwavering. "No, Dilrada. I'm here to expose you for what you truly are. You've lied, manipulated, and tried to destroy everything we've built. But today, I'm putting an end to it." The crowd grew quiet, sensing the tension between the two women. Dilrada's smug expression faltered for just a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You think you can stop me, Sayira? You think anyone will believe your poor farmer husband over me? You're nothing more than a foolish girl who doesn't know her place." Sayira's eyes burned with anger, but she refused to let the insult shake her. She had heard enough of Dilrada's cruelty. You think that because you have money, you have power, but money doesn't make you a good person, Dilrada. You've hurt people for far too long. You've poisoned this village with your lies, trying to turn everyone against Tahiryan. You've twisted the truth to suit your petty jealousy. The villagers, who had been listening quietly, began to murmur among themselves. For the first time, they were hearing Sayira's side of the story. The truth was coming out, and they were beginning to see the real Dilrada, the woman who had been manipulating them all along. Sayira's voice grew stronger as she continued. Tahiryan is a man of integrity. He has worked hard for everything he has, and his success is a result of his talent and dedication. He doesn't need to steal from anyone. And as for you, Dilrada, it's time everyone knows the truth about the poison you've spread. Dilrada's face twisted with anger, but she had no response. The villagers who had once doubted Tahiryan now turned their eyes to her with suspicion. The tide was shifting, and Sayira could see the change in their faces. The truth was finally breaking through the lies. "I will not let you continue to ruin our lives," Sayira said, her voice filled with resolve. "This is the last time you'll harm us, Dilrada. You've underestimated me, but I'm no longer the frightened girl you once controlled. I'm a woman who knows her worth, and I will protect the man I love. You will not tear us apart." The crowd erupted into applause. The villagers, who had once been swayed by Dilrada's rumors, now rallied behind Sayira and Tahiryan. They began to speak out against Dilrada, telling her that they no longer believed her lies. Some even apologized to Tahiryan for doubting him, their faces filled with regret. Dilrada, now standing alone, seethed with fury, but she knew the game was up. Her lies had been exposed, and there was no turning back. She could feel her control over the village slipping away, and for the first time, she was powerless. Sayira turned to Tahiryan, who had been watching her with a proud smile. "We've done it," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "We've fought for our happiness, and now no one can take it from us." With the support of the villagers behind them, Sayira and Tahiryan's business began to thrive once again. The market once more became a place where people celebrated Tahiryan's work and the love they had built together. And for Sayira, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she no longer lived in the shadow of her past, but stood tall, confident, and unafraid to fight for what was right. Tahiryan's wooden sculptures had always been remarkable, but they had never caught the attention of someone with the kind of power to change their lives. That all changed one afternoon when a wealthy merchant from the city, renowned for dealing in high-end artwork, arrived at the market. His eyes immediately fell upon Tahiryan's carvings, and he was captivated by their intricate detail and the stories they seemed to tell. The merchant, whose name was Farhan, was known for his discerning taste, and he knew talent when he saw it. After studying the carvings closely, Farhan approached Tahiryan and Sayira with an offer that seemed almost too good to be true. He wanted to purchase a large quantity of Tahiryan's work and enter into a long-term contract. It was a partnership that would bring their art to a much broader audience, including high-end buyers from the city and beyond. Sayira stood beside Tahiryan, her heart pounding with excitement. This was the opportunity they had worked for, the breakthrough they had dreamed of, and it had come when they least expected it. Farhan explained that he had seen a lot of art in his life, but there was something uniquely special about Tahiryan's carvings. "There's a depth to your work," he said, "a soul that speaks to people. I believe it can command not just attention, but respect." Sayira couldn't help but smile as she watched Tahiryan's humble, thoughtful response. He had never sought recognition or fame. His passion for his craft had always come from within. Now, his hard work and quiet dedication were finally being acknowledged in a way he had never imagined. As the contract was finalized and their partnership with Farhan began to take shape, their lives began to transform in ways they hadn't anticipated. The once humble farmer's hut was replaced by a larger, more comfortable home, one that was filled with the fruits of their labor, wooden carvings, gifts from the market, and now the financial stability they had only dreamed of. Tahiryan's workshop expanded, and they employed a small team of craftsmen to help with the increasing demand. But what was most striking to Sayira wasn't the wealth or the comfort that came with their new life. It was the realization that this success had come not from her previous life of luxury, but from a place of love, patience, and shared effort. She no longer found herself yearning for the wealth and status she had once craved in her father's home. She didn't need expensive jewels or elaborate parties to feel fulfilled. Instead, she valued the partnership they had built together, the quiet strength and unwavering support that had been the foundation of their love. Sayira looked at Tahiryan one evening as they sat together on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. "You've changed me, Tahiryan," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "Your love, your patience, your unwavering belief in us. It's more than I ever could have asked for." Tahiryan smiled, reaching for her hand. "We've changed each other, Sayira. This journey, our journey, it's been about growing together, about finding strength in each other and in what we can build." In that moment, as the light faded and the stars began to appear in the sky, Sayira knew that she had found something far more precious than material wealth. She had found a love that had transformed her, a love that was built on respect, shared dreams, and a future that was theirs to shape together. It was a quiet morning when Sayira decided to visit her late father's grave. The sun had just risen, casting a soft golden light over the fields, and the air was still crisp with the freshness of dawn. She walked slowly, her steps steady, but filled with a sense of purpose. As she approached the small hill where her father was buried, memories of her childhood came flooding back. The laughter, the love, the warmth of a life filled with luxury and comfort. But it also reminded her of the pain, the loss, and the hardships she had faced after his death. Sayira stood before the grave, her heart full of gratitude and reflection. "Father," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "I thank you for everything you gave me, your love, your protection, and the strength you taught me to carry on, even when it felt like everything was falling apart." She knelt beside the grave, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers, flowers she had picked herself, onto the ground. They were simple, but they symbolized the life she had come to embrace, a life that wasn't defined by wealth or status, but by love, humility, and the courage to start anew. "I never imagined that I would find happiness in a life so different from the one you had planned for me," Sayira continued, her eyes closing as the memories of her past and her journey swept over her. "But now I understand. It wasn't about the riches, the grandeur. It was about love, true, honest love, that grows with patience and time." Her thoughts turned to Tahiryan, the man who had patiently cared for her when she had been too proud to see his worth. She remembered his quiet strength, his unwavering support, and how, through all the struggles they had faced, he had always been there for her. He had shown her what it meant to build a life together, from the ground up, with respect and dedication. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they weren't of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude. "You gave me the strength to endure, Father. You taught me to never give up, even when the road ahead seemed impossible. And now, I've found the greatest love I could ever imagine, in a man who is nothing like the man I thought I needed." Sayira stood up, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She knew, deep in her heart, that her father had always wanted the best for her. And perhaps the best wasn't what she had once thought it was. It wasn't about wealth, or position, or the life she had been expected to lead. It was about finding true happiness, a happiness that came from within, and from the love she had found in Tahiryan. As she walked back down the hill, the warmth of the sun now fully embracing her, she smiled to herself. She couldn't change the past, but she had learned to accept it and make peace with it. Her journey had brought her to this moment, to a life that was full, not of material wealth, but of love, respect, and fulfillment. Tahiryan was waiting for her by their home, his presence a constant source of comfort and joy. As she approached him, he smiled, his eyes filled with the same warmth that had first captured her heart. Together, they stood hand in hand, looking out over the village that had become their home. They had both come so far, from a life of struggle and hardship to one of peace and contentment. Surrounded by the love and respect of their neighbours, their future was brighter than they could have ever imagined. And in that moment, Sayira knew, without a doubt, that her marriage to Tahiryan had been the best thing that ever happened to her. The love they had built was the true treasure she had been seeking all along.